Hello and welcome to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm your host Gordon Smith and I'm joined this week by Jay Shabbat and Meghna Maharishi. In part 1 we're dissecting Delta's latest financials, and in part 2 we're asking where it all went so badly wrong for Wizz Air Abu Dhabi. Hi Jay, how's it going?
Okay, Gordon, how are you? We have a special guest today, don't we?
We do. From the humble Airline Weekly Lounge podcast to the Bloomberg studio, we had Meghna, our hardworking, incredibly diligent Skift Airlines reporter. What was it? Was it 6:30 a.m., the slot on Bloomberg TV last week, Meghna?
Yes, I was on at 6:30. I was at 4 a.m. for it, so it was a very long morning.
The city that never sleeps, but I'm sure that was still a tough wake-up call for you. For anyone that didn't see that early morning TV hit on Bloomberg, Meghna was discussing Delta's latest financials, and I'm delighted to say that she's joining us in part 1 of the podcast today to discuss those in a bit more detail. Jay, before we cross over and get some insights from Meghna, just give us the headline numbers for anyone that's listening to the podcast that might have missed those from last week.
Sure, we'll do. Delta, they're always early. We're the first major airline to report their second quarter results. We did have 2 other airlines, just FYI, that did report last week, Norwegian and Korean Air, and you can read about them in our Airline Weekly issue this week. But back to Delta, they recorded a 13% operating margin, which is it's a good number, 13%. Anytime an airline is over, when you get into double digits, that's considered good. It was a little bit down from last year. Last year was closer to 15%, so about 2 points down. And all of these numbers I'm giving you are excluding special items. I should add that point. And Meghna will tell us more. Just very briefly, wanted to note that Delta paid only $2.26 for fuel on average. That's per gallon. Last quarter, and if you go back to the same quarter a year earlier, it was $2.64. So 226 versus 264. So they little bit strange that they saw their fuel bill drop so significantly, yet their margins also dropped significantly. So Meghna, you want to tell us some more?
Yeah, so I guess Delta had a good quarter compared to last time during the first quarter. I mean, the tone of executives was very cautious and uneasy in April, and then it fully turned around last Thursday. I'm not sure if I entirely buy their positivity, and I think Delta's very upbeat earnings are something that's only going to be maybe a Delta and a United thing. I don't think the other airlines that are set to report earnings in the coming weeks will have the same very optimistic results.
I tend to share that sentiment. I think we may get a little bit of a more gloomier picture when some of the low-cost carriers report, and perhaps even American, because they're so domestic-oriented. And I think international, it's maybe less of an international-domestic split than it was earlier in the year or even last year. It seems to be more bifurcated across premium versus non-premium. The premium is holding up really well. I mean, Delta said that their premium revenues were up 5%. But their non-premium revenues were down 5%. I believe someone can correct me. I'm doing that from memory there, but something to that effect. Quite a large spread there. So something is there's definitely weakness in that non-premium segment, and even I think that's even international too. It's probably more pronounced domestic, but we'll get a much better picture of exactly the extent of that weakness as more of these U.S. carriers report, especially some of the low-cost carriers.
And Jay, when we had the Q1 numbers from Delta, as Meghna alluded, the mood music was pretty somber, lots of tariff uncertainty, economic uncertainty more generally, and then we had this period of relative tranquility. And then in recent days, it does seem like the tariff rhetoric has been ramping up, not least between the US and the EU. Do you think we might actually reflect on Q2 as being the eye of the storm, and we could be entering slightly turbulent skies in terms of the financials and the tariffs and all that geopolitical stuff that we might have maybe hoped was in the rearview mirror?
Well, that's definitely a scenario because the tariffs, obviously, there's still a lot of uncertainty surrounding them, what the rates are going to be, what exactly is included in how it's going to affect consumer spending, how is it going to affect industrial output, all sorts of uncertainty. So, absolutely, that is a plausible scenario where, as you said, we look back at second quarter as being maybe a high point of the year. Time will tell. Now, what Delta, one of their arguments, and it seems to, I think there's legitimacy to this, that the non-premium weakness that I just mentioned before will be somewhat addressed by the rather aggressive capacity cutting across the industry. So Delta itself is removing a lot of capacity. And then if you look at Spirit being, just down, their capacity is down by something like a fifth year over year. And you look at cuts by even giant Southwest, they're cutting, some other low-cost carriers as well, JetBlue. So it might just be, the antidote to this weak demand situation is a big drop in supply. And we'll just have to see how that all plays out. Now, it is kind of remarkable to me. I can't remember ever seeing a situation like this in my career covering airlines, where fuel is very cheap right now, yet everyone is pretty distressed. I mean, there might have been some times, immediately after a big recession or something, but we don't have a recession in the United States. I mean, at least the numbers are, the hard data that we're getting from job markets and from corporate earnings and all that. The economy still appears to be growing. Fuel is, rather cheap, relatively speaking. Yet there's all this weakness in the non-premium segment. So we just don't really know how that's going to play out. A ton of uncertainty. And yeah, as I said before, not to beat a dead horse here, but I think there's a lot of. It's with great anticipation that we're going to the Airline Weekly team and others are going to be listening to some of these other airlines like Southwest and JetBlue and Spirit as they report in the coming weeks.
For sure. And Magna Loyalty, a huge profit center for most of the major US airlines. Delta is no exception. They've got their American Express partnership. Did we get any additional color on how that's performing?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like the remuneration that they get from that very lucrative American Express partnership was up, I believe, around 10% this quarter, which was impressive. And it also seems as if Delta is going full steam with investing more in their lounges, and they want to open more Delta One lounges. They want to create bigger Sky Club lounges to address the overcrowding that has been going on for the past couple of years. So it seems as if loyalty has done really well, and we can also see that in the way that premium revenues have also been up, and the fact that also Delta executives are even discussing potentially segmenting the premium cabin.
And for maybe listeners of the program that aren't quite familiar with what segmenting a cabin might look like in practice, feel like in practice, this is going to potentially look at the business class cabin in particular, and whereas you've got almost every seat being the same, give or take, this may introduce a sort of tiering of options, perhaps a sort of business class plus even, or are we looking more at the fare side of things with sort of business-like tickets that will give you just basically the seat and the food and not much else, versus the bells and whistles, which will give you all the extra baggage, all the lounge access, the fast track and so on. What was the impression that you got in terms of just how that diversification of the product might go?
So Delta didn't give a clear picture on what exactly that would look like. So we don't know if we'll see like a basic business fare or something in the next year or so, but they did say that they're studying it right now and they're trying to test some sort of segmentation with customers. And I think that they said this is really rooted in the fact that premium has been doing so well, and they want to give customers more choice when it comes to the premium cabin.
Yeah, I think we'll get more announcements from Delta on that, and as time goes on.
Yeah, probably wouldn't be too surprising. You're looking more internationally, Qatar Airways, KLM, Etihad, they all have been able to make this work quite effectively for them in the business class cabin. Features that were once taken for granted, fast becoming those optional add-ons. As we're recording here on July 14th, Jay and Meghna, we've obviously got United coming up this Thursday. What's your expectation? If I had to put you on the spot, if you're looking at your crystal ball, what are the key trends, the key elements that we should be looking out for?
Well, I think in the past few quarters, even going back a couple of years, United's trends have pretty closely mirrored those of Delta. So I think we're going to see similarly their United's premium up rather strongly. I think they'll probably mention that same non-premium weakness. As going back to your last question, I'm sure United did very well with their loyalty program. So I think we probably will hear more of the same. It's United and Delta kind of moved in I don't want to say in lockstep. That may be too strong, but they've exhibited many of the same trends. And it'll start getting a little more interesting when we'll get in some of these other more domestic heavy carriers.
I definitely agree with Jay on that. I think United is going to be similar to Delta. I think when we get to American, Southwest, JetBlue, I don't think they're going to be seeing the same super positive results. I think United has also really invested a lot in premium, and I think their strategy in recent years has really mirrored that of Delta's. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if they also have very upbeat second quarter results.
Speaking as somebody from this side of the pond looking across, it can sometimes feel like Delta and United versus everyone else, just in terms of they are sometimes in a class of their own, certainly when it comes to some of the operating margins and other metrics for success. Is that an oversimplification, Jay?
No, I mean, I think that's been the pattern over really throughout the post-pandemic period, that United and Delta have distinguished themselves. There's a few, smaller outliers. Sun Country has done very well in the post-pandemic period. Allegiant seems to have, improved their margins. Alaska has been very solid. But if you look at certainly United and Delta versus American has been the laggard. Variety of reasons for that we've discussed on this podcast and in our newsletter. And then once you get into, Southwest, Spirit, JetBlue, Frontier, all of those are distressed, have been distressed to varying degrees. Obviously, Spirit had to take itself through bankruptcy to survive, and JetBlue is it's not looking particularly promising there. Southwest is undertaking a huge array of changes. If I can just say one more thing, when you asked Meghna the question about the loyalty programs, you had sent me a message this morning, Gordon, or posted it on our company site there, the message board, about Southwest and moving into what was the newest route that they're announcing?
St. Thomas, I believe. Yeah.
St. Thomas, and they said they're going to announce two more. So you were all playing guessing games of what market what the other two markets might be. But the point I want to make is that it does seem increasingly like these U.S. airlines are planning their networks more and more around what's helpful to their loyalty program. And if you look at, why did Southwest announce a new Caribbean route? Well, it could be a million reasons, different reasons why. But the first thing that I thought of is, well, every time you announce, an attractive leisure destination, well, your loyalty points become that much more valuable. And so I just wanted to make that observation that I think a lot of airline network planning teams are increasingly taking that into account when they decide, which dart, when they're throwing darts at the map and deciding where to fly next. I think they're increasingly thinking about, well, how is this going to boost the value of our loyalty program? Because as we've seen, and this is nothing new, but it just keeps, the ball keeps getting rolling bigger and bigger. The loyalty programs are just so massively lucrative. They bring in, just such impressive profit margins. So if you can, add a new route to the Caribbean or Hawaii, or let's see if Southwest does Europe next. I suppose one possibility for a new route for Southwest would be over to Europe, like a Dublin or something you can reach with maxes from the Eastern U.S. We'll have to see. But I just wanted to make that point about the relationship between network planning and the loyalty programs.
I don't think you'll have made any friends in the network planning community, Jay, by suggesting they're throwing darts at the map. Meghna, any final thoughts on Delta before we bring this part to the close?
Sure. I think it's interesting to see how premium is becoming very, very important to these airlines in the face of all this economic uncertainty. I think, consumers still haven't really felt like the full effects of the tariffs, but it is still having an impact on airlines' bottom lines. And I think it's really fascinating how, Delta and United are now increasingly more reliant on premium, and this dynamic between Delta and United sort of being at the top of the pack, I think is going to be more magnified in the coming quarters if they continue to have this momentum. I think it's also just very interesting that this was something that Delta noted, was that they saw some softness in transatlantic demand this quarter, which is interesting just because historically the second quarter has been one of the biggest for transatlantic demand. And it seems as if things like climate change and over-tourism are also impacting the way people travel to Europe. So I guess we'll see if that demand now gets pushed back to maybe the third and fourth quarter of the year.
And on that same kind of general topic, over the past 6 months, the U.S. dollar, which had been appreciating a lot versus most foreign currencies, has now gone in reverse and has been depreciating. So I think one thing that has been very beneficial to some of these carriers like Delta and United specifically, the Americans have just been traveling abroad so much because it's been cheaper because the dollar's been stronger. But that's becoming less the case, whether it be Americans finding that Europe is now a little bit more expensive, Japan a little bit more expensive. You can kind of go around the world. We'll see the extent of that impact going forward.
Great point, Jay, and certainly some themes that I'm sure we will pick up on in a future episode. It's been a pleasure to have you join us on the podcast today, Meghna. Please do come back and join us again soon. We will be back very shortly in part 2 discussing Wizz Air Abu Dhabi. But before that, just a quick reminder, don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening or watching. And if you are enjoying the show, please rate us 5 stars or leave us a positive review so we can continue to spread the word about the Airline Weekly Lounge. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Hey everybody, I'm Sarah Kopit, Editor-in-Chief at Skift, and I've got to be honest with you, I am just blown away by how fast our industry is changing. AI is transforming how people book, platforms are flipping business models and consumer behavior. It is more unpredictable than ever. And that's why I am so excited for this year's Skift Global Forum happening September 16th through 18th in New York City. This year's theme jumps into the future, Travel 2030, people, platforms, and new paths forward. You'll hear from leaders at Booking Holdings, IHG, AirAsia, plus dozens more shaping the future of travel. And this year, we've got more than just stage talks. We've got expert-guided roundtables and new networking formats designed to spark real conversation so you can do real business. Expect it to be more interactive, more personal, and more valuable than ever. Join me and the rest of the industry at Skift Global Forum. Use the code PODCASTS for $800 off the full price at live.skift.com. Hope to see you there.
Hello and welcome back to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm Gordon Smith. We were joined in part 1 with Meghna. Now just Jay and myself, we are going to be discussing Wizz Air Abu Dhabi, Jay, because as we're recording here on Monday 14th of July, we had a statement from Wizz Air as part of a, quote, strategic realignment and focus on core markets. They are suspending all Wizz Air Abu Dhabi operations. That's with effect of September 1st this year, so just 7 weeks away. They also intend to exit from the joint venture going forward. Anyone that's been following these guys closely will know that it was a joint venture with ADQ, which is the state-backed sort of investment firm there in Abu Dhabi. It's a big shock in terms of just the amount of capacity that's going to be taken up the market. It's arguably less of a big shock if you've been looking at Abu Dhabi for Wizz Air, because there has been some softness in that market. I think it was just last week that they announced that some of their services were going to be temporarily suspended, others were going to be cancelled. So some of the indicators that something wasn't quite right had been there for a while, but a full-scale withdrawal of all Wizz Air Abu Dhabi operations is maybe a bit more than even some were expecting. There were 3 reasons in the market filing that they gave, and it was engine reliability constraints, geopolitical volatility, and regulatory barriers. Not my words, that's verbatim from the market statement. Jay, we discussed Wizz Air and touched on Wizz Air Abu Dhabi just a few weeks ago on the podcast. Did this come as a surprise to you?
Not at all. I don't think that's...
End of the show. That was a quick part 2.
Yeah, that's it. Let's close it up. Yep. Last word. The reason why it wasn't terribly surprising, and it wouldn't be to anyone who listened to Wizz Air's last earnings call a few weeks ago, or maybe it was last month, or it's probably the end of June. Can't remember exactly when it was. But they made it pretty clear that some of those Middle Eastern routes were not doing very well, and it's not terribly difficult to understand why. I guess if I could just step back, maybe take a little bit of a broader view, because I know we spoke about Wizz Air at length, as you mentioned a few weeks ago on this podcast, and then if you recall, for those of you who read Airline Weekly, the newsletter, our feature story on Wizz Air a couple weeks ago discussed the Abu Dhabi market and talked about some of the reasons why it's struggling, and even suggested that an exit may be coming. So again, no surprise. Let me step back a minute. If you go back you can even go back 15, 20 years, and I think there was this understanding among people throughout the airline industry that there would very likely be an aircraft shortage over the coming decade, 2 decades. And that's even before COVID, even before the supply chain issues that we've, experienced, the engine issues that we've all, that we know about in recent years. I think there was just, it's not really, you could sort of see why they would think that. I mean, first of all, there are just 2 suppliers and 2 major suppliers, Airbus and Boeing. You also go back and think about the historical rate of growth of demand in the airline industry globally has been, just extremely impressive over time. I mean, air transport, or let's say air traffic, has outpaced the growth of GDP, going back decades. And sure, you have a year or 2 or 3 here and there, COVID or global financial, crisis, or 9/11, whatever, you get, you get a few years where that's not the case. But the long-term trend in demand is way up. And then supply, you can sort of see reasons why it would be constrained. And I think for a lot of airlines that held that view, there was this thinking that let's go out and let's just order a whole bunch of planes. And particularly if you look at the A321neo, if you look at the 737 MAX 8, MAX 9, let's say MAX 8. If you look at the 787-9, those are 3 superstar aircraft products. And I think there was this thinking, if we order a whole bunch of these, great, we'll use them ourselves. But just in case we can't use them ourselves, if we, overextend a little bit in terms of our opportunities, there will always be a market to, lease these out or sell them because the market's going to be tight. I think there are a lot of people thinking that over the past years. And they were actually correct. I mean, the market is very tight. Demand is very good. And let's take Wizz Air, for example. At some point over the past couple of years, they went to Indigo Partners, which is, their major shareholder. And I'm sure they said, hey, let's just order a boatload of A321neos because we're a profitable airline. We're growing really fast. We have so many opportunities. Look at, Eastern Europe look at, we can expand in the Ukraine. We can expand in the Middle East. We can expand, eventually with these XLRs, we go all the way to India. Let's order hundreds and hundreds of planes. And if it doesn't work out, we can always, lease them out or sell them. And that's kind of what's happening right now. So they're in this situation where they have been, maybe got out over their skis a little bit in terms of their opportunities. Obviously, this Abu Dhabi thing has not worked. And I can't imagine that even some of the Saudi Arabia stuff that they're doing is all that profitable. Obviously, they've had a ton of disruptions in Israel where they were a very large carrier, one of the leading players in the market. They've had a very similar situation in Ukraine where likewise they were a very large player. And so, and they've absolutely been successful in leasing out their airplanes. Now, what they've typically done is they've been successful in selling their aircraft at a very good price. And what they typically have done is leased them back. However, have we reached a point where maybe they're going to have just too many planes? Like they're not only going to have to sell them, but just outright get rid of them and not operate them anymore. We have seen Wizz cut back on their orders, or at least I know they deferred their orders. I believe they may have cut some. Yeah, might not be. I'd have to double check that. But you'd have to wonder if Wizz Air's thinking now that maybe we've got too many planes. Maybe we've gone too far. Even though yes, we can sell them off for a good price. We can lease them or sell them. It may just be that they over ordered. So it's a long way of saying that maybe they were irrationally exuberant.
We did have some insights from the Wizz Air CEO, Joseph Varadi. He said, quote, "The operating environment has changed significantly. Supply chain constraints, geopolitical instability, and limited market access have made it increasingly difficult to sustain our original ambitions." That's specific to Wizz Air Abu Dhabi. He continued, "While this was a difficult decision, it is the right one given the circumstances." Jay, close industry watchers may be aware that Tony Fernandez of Capital Way/AirAsia fame is eyeing up the Middle East as a possible place to have a regional hub to connect Southeast Asia and Europe. Do you think this shows that the ultra low-cost model, the low-cost model, is not completely dead?
Two things. So interesting you bring up AirAsia. I was just talking about them with our colleague Josh over in Dubai this morning. And this would probably, the fact that Wizz Air is leaving Abu Dhabi, they'll probably see this as an opportunity. As some of you recall, AirAsia is interested in setting up a Gulf hub, let's call it, so that they can reach Europe with their A321s, A321XLRs. I won't comment on that per se. I think we've talked about that in the past, or I've certainly written about it in the newsletter. Let me say this about, you asked about low costs or longer haul routes. I think there's always a temptation for low cost carriers to go longer haul because there are a lot of economic efficiencies associated with that. If you fly longer distances, you're going to spread your fixed costs over more seats, over you're going to have more aircraft utilization. You're going to get more, let's say, bang for your buck. However, what tends to happen is that it's all well and good to get lower unit costs. I mean, that's a wonderful thing if you're a low-cost carrier, or any carrier for that matter. Where you get into trouble, though, is if you do things that don't allow your unit revenues to keep pace. So, yeah, you can lower your unit cost by 10%, but if your unit revenues go down by 15%, then you in the end, your strategy has failed. And I think Wizz Air may have stumbled down that track a little bit too much. I think they identified the Middle East as this really interesting opportunity. Hey, look, we can extend our average trip lengths. We can get our unit costs down by doing that. But I think in the end, what they're finding is that demand is not there. And they might dispute all this. They might say, well, the problem is, related to, the fact that so many of our planes are grounded. And as you mentioned, some of those other reasons that they gave them, the geopolitical tensions and whatnot. But I think, and for anyone who's, read what we've written about Wizz Air in the past, I think that's something that's sort of been on the radar for us as analysts for a while with them.
For sure. And we should just say that it's the locally based Wizz Air Abu Dhabi operations that are being suspended, in the words of Wizz Air. So there will still be some of the Wizz Air network touching the Middle East. I may be thinking Israel when things resume there. But it will probably be most likely from Central Europe coming into the Middle East and then returning back. So it won't be Abu Dhabi-based teams. Just for full transparency, dotting the I's, crossing the T's. This is not going to affect the Wizz Air operations more broadly. The broader Wizz Air network is not affected by that move. And any bookings beyond August 31st will be refunded or rebooked on alternative routes. So there we are. We've also got Wizz Air's quarterly earnings due on July 24th, Jay, so we should get some more insights in just under a couple of weeks' time. So
that'll be a good call.
It will be a good call. And it'll be actually interesting, looking even further beyond that. They had mentioned Budapest, I want to say, to Mumbai. And actually, I was joining Airbus media briefing at the Paris Air Show last month, and they did have that as one of their XLR trophy routes, so alongside Aer Lingus and Iberia crossing the Atlantic. They said Wizz Air would be taking the XLR from, I think it was Budapest, to Mumbai as one of the upcoming routes. So it'll be interesting to see, with everything else that's going on at Wizz Air, whether that continues. Very, very different markets, of course, but that's, dare I say, for another discussion, another day. Thank you again to Meghna for joining us in part one. Thanks to Jay for going the distance and joining me again in part two. Thanks as always to our producers, Monica, Doug, and Cole. And wherever you are in the world, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye for now.
Whether you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, please make sure to subscribe, rate us 5 stars, or leave us a positive review. This really helps us get the word out about the Airline Weekly Lounge, so we can continue to bring you this podcast every week, absolutely free of charge. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Skift channel and hit the notification bell to find out whenever a new video drops.